Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio Network, which is a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. Folks, I love doing this show because I love to hear people's stories. I love to tell you about resources. And with me today is another phenomenal guest who I met through a friend of my son's. Danny was on last year. I'm going to have Danny on again next month, actually. And Danny introduced me to George Chaos Arnolds, and he has a background in the underground music entertainment industry in New York City way back in the 80s, and George contacted me, and he wants to share his story. So that's what we're going to hear today. We're going to hear George's story. Welcome to Chatting with Betsy, George.
Well, good morning, and good morning, everybody listening. How are you all today? And I've been in music up until about 2014 also. On and off.
On and off. What kind of music were you involved in, George?
Punk rock and heavy metal. Yeah. The stuff that nobody wants to listen to. That's not my cup of tea, but you know what? That's why there's different kinds of music, right? Because there's something for everyone. Exactly. As long as we had a good crowd, it did not matter if we sold albums. We had a crowd that showed up and they were enthusiastic and they're coming back. That mattered more.
Yes, and you have a YouTube channel.
Yes, I do.
Right?
I used to film bands.
What's the name of your? I saw your music channel yesterday. What's the name of your music channel, George? Because I'm gonna put that in the blog.
George Chaos Cam on YouTube.
Okay.
And the only bands that I have are bands that I'm personal friends with that I have filmed. And many of them have albums, and a lot of them have broken up by now, but that doesn't matter. They were good in the day, and their music is still good, and I still listen to it.
Did you film, or did you play an instrument, or both?
The last time I was in the music industry, I was just filming bands and taking photos at shows. I would do all-star band vocals, background vocals every once in a while, but mostly I just filmed. Everybody already knew me. I did bodyguard work. I did security work, which really didn't involve anything. People knew who I was. I had a reputation. People knew that I knew everybody, so people didn't want to push. The 5'8", 170-pound guy says, "Go away." A 6'3" guy's gonna back off because there's a 6'8" guy behind me.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting about videotaping these bands, because back in the 80s, I think it was the 80s, wasn't punk rock getting started, the heavy metal, the was that getting started then, or?
Well, 80s was the hardcore punk, and that's where I slipped into in the 80s. We had bands like Agnostic Front and Murphy's Law. Even the Beastie Boys' first album was hardcore punk. Well, EP, not album. Beastie Boys' EP was hardcore punk, and then they switched over for their first album. And I knew them back then when we were teenagers.
I myself, folks, am not familiar with the punk rock scene because that just isn't my kind of music. But if you are, that is your cup of music, that's cool. Go on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, one of the reasons that attracted me to that music is that nobody liked it, and it was basically just a bunch of us outcasts. people that weren't accepted by mainstream society, we gathered together and made our own music. It was like, okay, fine. If the mainstream don't want us, we'll make our own mainstream.
Well, you know what, George, that's a good point. You said something so profound right there. And I want to just say, because, you know, you all felt like outcasts, you didn't belong into what people, I call it, boxes that people like to put people in. You found your own group. People will find they gravitate towards what they attract. And, you know, I talk to people all the time on my show. Everyone wants a sense of belonging, wants a sense of giving to the community. And when people don't allow them because they don't fit a stereotype or they don't fit into someone's idea of what a punk rocker should look like or country music should look like, the people have started on their own. And that's you know, that's the way to do it. Find like-minded people and do your own thing, really.
Well, I had known people in music. I mean, I can't say I knew them because I was 11 years old, but my uncle was friends with Blondie and the Talking Heads when they were playing at CBGB's, and I would go along to shows with him because my uncle played in an opening band. Not a headline band, just one of the openers. So I was at CBGB's in 1977 watching Deborah Harry and Blondie on stage.
Now her I like. I liked her. Yeah, and Talking Heads.
Well, I find it incredible that I was on the same stage as Blondie, and I love that.
Wow, that is cool. Yeah, I really see now. I like a variety of music, and I did like Blondie. I like some of her music. And Talking Heads, my son loves Talking Heads. Didn't they just have, if I'm thinking of the right group, didn't they just have a documentary out? Or is that another group I'm thinking of?
I think they did, but I'm not really sure. I haven't really kept up in a long time on the old bands.
Yeah, Talking Heads.
The singer went out solo for a long time, and I kind of lost track once he went solo. It got a little too mainstream for me.
Didn't they sing? Are they the ones that sang "Psycho Killer"?
Yes. That's one of their oldest songs too.
Yeah.
One of their oldest songs. One of the first originals they did.
Yeah. Now, Talking Heads, their music I like. So, and Josh and I went to see their documentary earlier this year, which was really good. We really enjoyed it. And you know, I'm 66. I enjoyed the documentary. I do like the Talking Heads. Even my husband liked the Talking Heads. So they were good.
Myself, so yeah.
Oh, okay. Not too far for me.
No.
Excuse me.
I don't know how I made it to 58, but here I am, and I feel great. And I'm going to be around a long time if I have anything to do with it. That's great. Give us some of your background, George, because I know that from previously talking to you, you were your family treated you like the black sheep. I could definitely relate to that. And you were. I don't know what it was.
You know what?
When I was young.
When you were young, yes, yeah.
Really young.
I heard on Instagram, and I don't even remember who it is, but I've seen a lot of stuff on the social media about children who are treated as black sheep. And sometimes it's because we speak the truth and we let out the dirty laundry.
Well, a lot of that is the Generation X. It's my generation, the ones that, but more specifically, the Generation X that grew up with nothing. I mean, there's a lot of people my age. There's a lot of people my age who grew up in a nice with a nice house, with a nice family and great relatives. And there's a lot of us that grew up with none of that, where nobody in our family wanted anything to do with us because we were those wild kids. Well, you raised me this way, you know. We were called latchkey kids for a reason.
Yeah, and the baby boomers too, George. You know, my mother and father didn't entertain us. They opened the door to the outside, and you found your own entertainment.
Yeah.
You know, you weren't allowed to show emotion, express emotion. If you did, that was considered a sign of weakness, which is what I'm trying to change society by using my voice. And to expose abuse was not heard of. To go for counseling was a big no-no. So I was the one in my family who exposed stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the abuse was just part of the deal. It was just called child raising back then.
Yeah.
And it was sort of the belief where if you didn't beat your children often enough, they would turn out horrible. Well, it turns out if you beat them too much, they turn out really horrible. So, you know, hey.
Right.
I don't know.
You know what, George, it's not just like I wasn't beaten. I was emotional. So emotional abuse is, to me, it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
It has the same effect. Long-term effect. Yes. It's the same.
Exactly. It affects me to this day. To this day, it still affects me.
Oh, yeah. Many things still come up and affect me. Like, I've cut myself off from most of society in the last, say, year or so because I can't be bothered. I keep trying to be nice. I keep trying to say hello to people. They don't want to get back to me. They're too busy. Well, then I just stopped. And actually, honestly, I've been happier. It's really weird. But I never thought it was this way. When I would spend too much time by myself, I would get into this rut of anger and depression, and I couldn't get myself out of it by myself. And since I've intentionally just decided to stop caring and just let the apathy take over, I feel happier. I feel relief. I'm not stressed like I was. I don't get angry. I don't get depressed. If it's a nice day out, I sit outside and enjoy the air and listen to the birds, and I can find peace in that for hours.
Yeah, I totally understand, because I would rather. Now, this is me, folks. And I've always been a loner my whole life. I would rather be alone than be with fake people, or people that make you feel like you're alone. So you might as well be alone anyway.
Well, I seem to notice that the crowd of friends gets smaller the older we get.
Yes.
As a teenager, I would hang out with a few hundred people, and then a few dozen people, and then a handful of people, and then 2 people, and now nobody.
Well,
I don't know. I feel
I'm right there with
better
you
now. Yeah, I feel better now. I mean, I lose track of days, but it doesn't really matter. I'm disabled. I don't work. As long as I pay my rent and have food, I don't have to pay attention to anything, to the days at all.
That's right. And I'll tell you, George, there's a freedom and not caring about what people think and being obsessive. Like I used to think, oh, what do people think of me? And, am I good enough? And even like doing my show, I'm like, oh, who's going to listen to my voice? This is what I used to think. Who's going to listen to me? And you know what? I just believe in being my authentic self, and whoever it attracts, it attracts. I'm
right.
I tell my son all the time, not everyone's going to like you, and you're not going to like everybody, and it's okay.
That's
fine.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And when I was younger, I had the opposite. I look at things like I was too good for most people, because I would listen to things people say and realize, wow, you're like completely uneducated about reality, aren't you? And I don't want to have anything to do with that. Go away. Yours is not flat. Leave me alone. Yeah. But that's I know flat Earth is a new thing. That's been popping up. But there's always been something similar to that, where people deny reality because of something that they heard, and it's always been that way. And I've always been able to see through all of that. Somebody made up something in the story, the blah blah blah. I see through it, and I see the realities. Yeah. But also, I spent a lot of time in libraries. I spent a lot of time reading. I educated myself more than school ever did, because I didn't really go to school. There was no time. When I was 13, I had to get a job because I needed to pay for my own food and clothing, and I had to pay rent because I was 13. But, when you grow up in New York City and you get told in the 4th grade you're old enough to ride the subway by yourself to school every day, yeah, when you're 13, it's, go to work.
Yeah, well, you know what?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the the attitude back then. Your parents were in the World War II generation.
No. My parents were born in the late 40s. After my grandfather was in World War II, and my father was born 47.
Okay, so they were raised by World War II generation. Yeah. So that carried over. I mean, my parents were from the World War II generation. It's like, you know what? At 14, I started working, babysitting. And when I did get a, full-time job, I did, have to contribute, which, was only right as an adult. But, told point blank, you want a car? You work for it. We can't afford to buy you a car or pay for your car insurance or college. My sister had to take out college loans. I mean, that's the way it was back then.
Well, I also remember back in the 80s, that everybody always said that 1 week's salary should pay your rent, 1 week's salary should buy your food, 1 week's salary for living, and 1 week's salary for savings. So according to that, a quarter of your income should be spent on rent. My parents took that and said, okay, we want 70% of what you make for rent.
Wow.
What? Huh? And then I realized I could rent a house cheaper than living in a room, living in a room in my parents' house. So I did. And it got to that point. It got to that point where I had to do what was right for me.
Yeah.
You can't hold me in. You can't lock me down and take everything from me and then accuse me of not having anything. Well, I would have more if you didn't take it. It doesn't make any sense because my parents were rather well off.
Were they putting into a savings account for you, George? Like some parents do that. No. They put the money.
No.
Yeah,
mine
didn't either.
No.
Yeah.
My grandparents had a college fund set up for me. It was a joint account. They were putting money in a joint account. My parents and myself, joint account. They were putting the money in for me, but I was underage, so they were making a joint account. And my parents did the banking. I just signed the paper, and it turns out somehow that my grandparents had put money every month in my college account for almost 19 years, and somehow all that money ran out after 2.5 years at community college, Queens Community College. Don't know how. But the money was gone. But there's only one person that had access to my bank account, and that was my parents. So they obviously took out a lot more than what I needed.
So they were taking your money then?
Oh, yeah. classes were $300 a semester, and I only took 3 classes. It's impossible to go through that much money because there would have been well over $100,000 in my college fund account, and somehow it ran out after $5,000 or $6,000. So that money was disappeared. That always happened, though. My inheritance disappeared. Everybody in my family knew that I was going to be rich when I turned 21 or whatever it was, because my grandparents left me a lot. My grandfather made a lot of good investments when he got back from World War II. He took his GI loan, bought a restaurant. You might have heard of the Heidelberg on 5th Avenue in Manhattan.
No,
my grandfather.
Sorry.
It was an authentic German restaurant at 5th Avenue in Manhattan. My grandfather had owned it from the 50s until 1978.
Wow.
So
That's
did
amazing.
fairly well. It did fairly well, and he bought 4 houses while the neighborhood was being developed. So, he did fairly well with it. Yeah, very well and very well invested. So, they saved me all that. And I was supposed to get $6 million and a house. Never got any of that. Somehow the will didn't exist, but everybody in my family knew about the will, but no will was ever filed, which I find very strange. But oh well, that's what happens. I was angry for a while, and then I said, but wait a minute, what kind of person would I be if you just hand me $6 million? At that time, I saw it as, well, that would just make me one of those greedy people that I don't like, getting handed everything. You know, I'd rather think I'm better than somebody intellectually than because I have money. No. Intellectually, I can at least try to educate people. But if I have money and I think somebody's low life because they don't have anything, there's nothing I'm willing to do. There would be nothing that I would be willing to do, because that's how I always saw things. And it kind of is still. I mean, I know people that have money, and the more I have noticed that the more somebody has, the greedier they are.
Yeah. A lot of times that's true. Yeah, they want more.
Makes sense to me. That's what I said. Back in the 80s, we were the rejects and the outcasts. Half of us lived on the streets, yet we shared. So
that's how you survive.
You can't do that you can't do that with trust fund kids. They don't share. There's too many of them just with that attitude of, well, you don't have anything. Well,
yeah, there's a lot of
what does that mean?
People with a sense of entitlement. You know.
Yes.
Like, not what can I do for you, but what can you do for me? And there's
more
a lot
what
of
can
that.
I do for me and blame you for? That's what I think a lot of it is.
Yeah.
I do notice that because I've been seeing that. That's one of the reasons why I'm not on Facebook a lot, is I see that on Facebook way too often. If you disagree with somebody on something and tell them an actual fact, they will accuse you of bullying them. Well, no, it's not bullying. This is a fact. The sun is 93 million miles away, and the eclipse was caused by the moon crossing in front of the sun, creating a shadow. Okay, so how am I bullying? That's reality. I can't. That's why I can't. I can't.
Yeah.
I just can't.
Yeah. Oh, I see things on Facebook. I keep my mouth shut. Yeah.
It's expanded way too much.
Yeah. You're not going to change people's opinions. And I see stuff on Facebook. I don't even comment. I won't waste my energy because there's not going to be no change in their mind. So I'm not going to waste my time. How did you get through your adolescence? Being, you moved out of your family's house to where you are now.
Pure determination. There was nothing that was going to make me stop. I always knew that something is going to turn around because it always did. No matter how bad things got, I've been on the street, and even when I lived on the street, I kept myself clean. I did not look like I was homeless, and I knew that eventually something would happen, and it always did. It might take a year, might only be 3 months, but eventually things turned around. They may not have been great, but sometimes it was just a weekly rental hotel room that I was in. But that's better than the street, and you can only go up from there. So that's why, I don't know. I don't have that give up in me.
Right. Some people, George, they wonder, how does someone end up homeless, and people judge someone for being homeless, but all you need is a bad set of circumstances, losing your job.
Right.
Not all homeless people are on drugs. Some of them lost their jobs. You have a lot of veterans that are homeless.
Every single time I was homeless, it was because I had lost a job, and the only reason I had lost a job is because I ended up in the hospital because I had a seizure. So having seizures is what made me homeless so many times. And when you don't have an address, you don't qualify for anything. You don't qualify for SSI or Social Security or anything without an address. You need a stable address to be disabled, and I found that very weird. If I can't hold down a job, how do I pay rent? But if I can't pay rent, I can't be disabled. Wait a minute, that does not make sense.
No, it doesn't. Wow, I didn't know that.
And I don't know. Yeah, it's a really weird thing. I don't know why. I guess because they don't have any place to contact you or something. This is before cell phones, so
Oh yeah.
It wasn't like I could have. Yeah, you needed a mailing address, and I didn't have a mailing address, and I would not go to the shelters because no. I had thought about going to homeless shelter a few times, and when I got within a block, I just was like, I can't be around these people, because you have like 5 people trying to sell me drugs. It's like, I'm out. No, I'm going back to the subway. Goodbye. Subway's safer, cleaner, quieter. I'm going away. I felt safer sleeping on the subway than I would have in a homeless shelter.
Wow. And that's back in the 80s, George? That's back in the 80s and 90s?
80s and 90s.
80s and 90s. It's totally different now. From what I hear.
Well, from what I know out here in New Jersey, they've closed the men's shelters. So there is no such thing as a men's. I don't know about the rest of New Jersey, but at least in Monmouth County.
Oh.
From what I remember, homeless shelters, there are no homeless shelters for men out here. And women's shelters are hard to get into because you usually have to have a child with you, a young child with you to get into a women's shelter. So I know that they just shuffle people around. They move homeless people around from town to town. Because we had a bunch of homeless people here, and apparently the borough president was coming in, so the homeless people were moved to Trenton. Not to a shelter, just Trenton.
Yeah, they moved people around. I remember in the 90s when I forgot who was either Florio or Whitman when they closed down Marlboro. And these people were out on the streets, unmedicated, who needed to be medicated. And it was bad. It was really a bad situation. And they would put these people in awful neighborhoods, and some of them, unfortunately, died. They were killed or they just died from living out on the street.
Relocate. That's because of the NIMBY crowd. They're not in my backyard.
Yeah.
And when you're in a poor neighborhood, you don't have the right to say not in my backyard. But if you're in a middle-class neighborhood, get out of my neighborhood. And speaking of Marlboro, I got harassed in Marlboro because I had a friend who lived there, and I went to the store one day, and I got harassed by the cops because it didn't look like I belonged there. But
wow.
my friend's house is right there. You don't look like I belong in this neighborhood. What do you mean I don't look like I belong? Just because I got long hair and tattoos? Is that not allowed in Marlboro? What's the matter here?
Yeah, and there you have judgment.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
But it's always been that way.
Yeah.
Always. People think that's something new, and it's not. It's
No,
not.
It's not.
I was put down because I didn't have money. I was the bad guy because I didn't have family. I'm the bad guy because I don't have resources. I'm the bad guy because people don't want to help. That doesn't make sense to me. How am I the bad guy because of what other people do? That is the part that that I could never figure out.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. People, I find, George, they judge, and they should not, until they know all the facts. And if people don't know all the facts, then they really need to keep their mouth shut. I have that in my own family.
I have found people don't want to know facts.
No, they don't. They just want to judge.
Facts upset people. And I don't get why that is.
Because they don't want to hear the truth.
Yeah, I get that there's a lot of propaganda and a lot of people yelling things that aren't true, and people will believe the completely false things that people talk about, but nobody will ever look into it to find out that it's not true. They'll just believe the talking idiot that on whatever I don't know, media site that they prefer, whatever it is. And then they'll make up things and twist things around. I remember that happening in the 80s. I am seeing a repeat of the Reagan years. Now, people don't remember. A lot of people don't remember. Nazi skinheads started with Reagan. They called themselves the Reagan Youth.
Oh.
Yeah, people seem to forget that. That, yes, the Nazis thought that Reagan was one of them.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Nazi skinheads, yeah. I mean, the Klan was 100% behind Ronnie.
Oh, wow. I mean, of course I heard of skinheads, but and I know they were very common, and they are still very common.
Well,
I interviewed, and it's scary.
Before Reagan, the skinheads were just antisocial. We didn't want to know you. Don't care who you are. We don't want to. You're not part of our group. We don't want to know you. Keep walking. That's what it used to be. It was antisocial, and then it turned into some weird thing, some weird racist thing, which does not make sense to me whatsoever. Yeah, it's. I don't know. I grew up in the middle of the city. I'll never understand that whole racist thing. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't comprehend.
Yeah, I can't comprehend it either, George. I don't understand it at all. I really don't. And there's a lot of strife and bigotry and hatred now more than ever. And it's really...
It's like it was during Reagan. It's like it was during Reagan. People don't remember those years. You remember the preacher that Reagan had in the White House blamed AIDS on gay people.
That I kind of remember, yeah.
Yeah, Billy Graham said that AIDS was a punishment from God to gay people, punishing them for being gay. And even as a 14-year-old, I thought that was the stupidest thing that I ever heard.
Yeah, I remember the AIDS and, people were saying, and then, straight people were getting AIDS also from, transfusions, and as you were, using, drugs, and But
it's bodily fluids.
Yeah.
It was just straight up bodily fluids, and it doesn't matter who your partner was. The virus, you could have had the virus at the time. It didn't matter if you was straight, gay, whatever. You run the same risk at the time. But for some reason, it was they only blamed one particular demographic, which is really weird. I'll never get that. Because it's still the whole, let's blame a specific demographic of people for a thing. Which still doesn't make sense.
No.
And over 30 years, we've been hearing about how poor people are destroying America. Because I don't know.
There's a lot more poor people because of the way the economy is going. I mean, it's ridiculous what I spend at the grocery store for two people. Absolutely.
Well, I've been watching it for a long time, and I've been paying attention to it for a very long time, and this is nothing new. Back in the 1980, we had mental health hospitals where most of the mentally ill homeless people would have a place to not be on the street if we had the mental health hospitals still open.
That's right.
But that occurred at the same time when they decided that ketchup is going to be called a vegetable for school lunches.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I do.
And I wanted to figure out how a fruit. I wanted to know how, if you mashed a fruit, it became a vegetable.
Yeah, I do remember that about the ketchup.
Yeah.
That's
that's another slap at poor people.
Yeah.
Eat your food and shut up. That's what it was back then.
Yeah, I do remember them closing the mental institutions because I worked at Woodbridge Developmental Center, which is a state institution for the severely disabled, and we got a lot of those clients from Marlboro and the workers that worked there, and that was not good. Mixing disabled with people who have mental psychiatric problems, not a good mix, but that's a shame.
Yeah,
what was done.
I mean, mental health has been ignored for way too long.
Oh yes,
it's seen more of a weakness than anything else.
Yes,
and that's something I don't understand when the person who's calling it a weakness is literally having a temper tantrum.
Yeah,
you're a grown adult. You're a grown adult having a temper tantrum, telling me that I'm weak because I have emotions. Wait a minute. Hold on a second.
Yeah. Oh, I'll tell you, I'm a mental health advocate, George. I've done many shows on mental health, and it's the one thing about COVID is that it brought mental health to the forefront, and it made it more acceptable to go, for mental health counseling. It should have always been acceptable, but it wasn't, unfortunately. And I know I faced stigma for that as a teenager in the 70s. When I first went to a counselor, that was not accepted in 1974, folks. I'm going to tell you that now. It was not accepted. And it should have been, but it wasn't.
Now, I first started seeing a therapist when I was in the first grade. I don't know if it was it was the public school, and my parents got together and had me go to therapy. And that was in the first grade. So that was about, 1971? Something like that? 72, the latest? No, 71. 71, yeah. I was in therapy in 1971. I was taking the bus to go see a therapist by myself in 1971 in the first grade.
Wow.
Which is, again, weird. It's like, why wouldn't my parents even drive me to that?
Yeah.
But I didn't see it that way. I just saw it as, well, it's like school. I got to get on a bus and go. I didn't I didn't put it together that if my parents want me to do this, why don't they care enough to get me there?
Right.
Are they too busy to bother with their own child? I mean, I didn't start to see all of that until I got a little older, till I got to about 11 or 12 years old. That's when I started to really pick up on things. Like, stop trying to convince me we're poor when you have 2 cars and you have a second phone in the house. Nobody has 2 phones in the house, and nobody has 2 cars. Stop telling me we're poor. Poor people usually don't vacation for 3 weeks in the Caribbean. Stop that. I would stay with my grandparents. When my parents went on vacation, I would stay with my grandparents. That's just how it was. My grandparents lived up the block from us. So I lived there. That was the only time I was really allowed to spend with my grandparents because they were nice to me, and my parents did not appreciate the fact that my grandparents treated me nice. My grandmother would always my grandmother always put money into my pocket. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. They gave me money. They were nice to me. They bought me things, and my parents did not want that to happen. They didn't like that. It upset them or something. I don't know. They wanted me to do nothing. I don't understand it.
Yeah, sometimes we just can't figure out the why of parents too busy, why they ignore one child, favor another one, show blatant favoritism, show blatant dislike. I just can't figure it out. I can't figure it out.
Well, when I was like 12 or 13, I started to. I didn't know the word for it, but now it's known as affluenza, and that can apparently be brought on by getting too much too quick. Most affluenza are people who grew up with too much and never had to take responsibility for anything because they were too rich. I crashed my car. My parents will buy me another one. Big deal.
Oh, yeah.
That type of affluenza. Well, my parents did not grow up that way, but they turned into that. I don't care about that. I'll do what I want. Well, having the attitude of a 12-year-old is not a good thing when you're a parent.
That's true. That's very true. My parents were like, you make your bed, you lay in it. I always said, don't get, pregnant. Don't expect us to take care of a child. You have one out of wedlock. And that was just, ingrained that you're going to take responsibility if you make a mistake. We're not going to.
I had no choice. Like I said, I had to go to work when I was 13 so I could buy my own food and clothes and pay rent. So I already knew that I had to do everything. I had to figure out a way to do everything. Period. That's that. Nobody's going to give me a hand. Nobody's going to help out. I have to do it all. And I did. And it used to aggravate me that why am I the only one that has to do everything myself? And then it turned into I am the only one that can do everything by myself. What is wrong with everybody else?
Yeah, and then it made you a stronger person.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of the abuses kind of led to that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can only be slapped around and punched around by your parents so much before it stops affecting you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that affects you for.
Why I ended up being the smallest bouncer at a lot of clubs.
George, our time is up. What advice would you like to give the audience as far as being, recovering? I want to say recovering, but from what you grew up with. What's your advice?
Always remember, nothing is permanent. Things can change, and they usually do. And for every time something goes bad, two things will happen that are good. If you on a long enough time scale, things always improve. And this is a fact. I can say that from personal experience. Over a long enough period of time, things get better.
Yes, they do.
I'm no longer frustrated that I'm alone. I'm no longer frustrated. I don't have anybody in my life. I find it a relief now. It took me long enough to get to that point, but long enough time scale, and here I am.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on, Chatting with Betsy, and sharing your story. Folks, you heard George Chaos Arnold. And how can people contact you, George? Facebook?
I'm on Facebook, yes. I don't really do Facebook very often, but my messenger is usually open. But, yeah, George Chaos Arnold on Facebook.
Okay. And I'm going to put you're the only George Chaos Arnold. And I'll put your YouTube channel in the blog. Also, you're welcome. Folks, I love talking to people from all walks of life. And, if you want to share your story and Chatting with Betsy, just contact me through the station, PassionateWorldTalkRadioNetwork.com. And Betsy Wurzel, host. And I will get back to you. And I want to thank you, George, for coming on today and sharing some of your story. Folks, all the information. Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. All the information about George will be in the blog that Jeannie White, her station manager, writes. And Jeannie produces the show. Thank you for that, Jeannie, for that. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passionate World Talk Radio, who makes this all possible, who started Passionate World Talk Radio Network so people can have a voice. And you don't have to be famous to get on Passionate World Talk Radio to tell your story. This station and my show, I don't have requirements. You don't have to sell 1 million books. You don't have to be a bestseller. I love the human interest stories of how someone overcame a adversity and doing something with their life. There's many shows like that on Chatting with Betsy. And if you don't already subscribe to Chatting with Betsy, please do so. It's for free on Spotify, Spreaker, Amazon Music, Apple, to name a few. And please tell your friends about Chatting with Betsy, because I'm here to provide resources and help inspire you all to have a better life. And if you are a caregiver, I have #Kick, Alzheimer's Ask Movement on Facebook. And if you'd like to follow me, I'm on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel, Wurzel. And you could always inbox me if you would like to be on the show also. And that's the show for today, folks. Thank you again for listening. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind and shine your light bright, because we need it now more than ever. Take care, folks. Till we chat again, be safe. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Bye-bye now.